So, tier 4. What do we unlock first? What do we unlock last? Let's roll the intro and find out. What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to cover tier 4 of the tech tree in Robocraft. The tier 4 will house the weapons, movement, and shields. The weapons we'll cover will be tier 4 lasers, tier 4 plasmas, tier 4 rails, tier 4 nanos, tier 4 Tesla, tier 4 Aeroflag, tier 4 ion, tier 4 seeker, and tier 4 chain gun. For movements, we go for tier 4 mag legs, tier 4 sprinter legs, tier 4 insect legs, tier 4 wheels, tier 4 hovers, tier 4 rudders, tier 4 propellers and thrusters, they're in the same category, and tier 4 rudders and tier 4 wings. And for the shields, we go for the electro shield A, B, and C. Left and right, of course, and the tier 4 for variant, because I don't know, every tier has an ABC, so that's why I put it like this. So let's go into the weapon sections first. First one on the list is tier 4 lasers. These are my personal favorite weapons. To place one gun, you need 26 CPU. So only one gun is 26 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 26,000. Which basically means with only placing one gun without any cubes or any movement parts, you will get placed into tier 3. Some guns may place you in tier 4, but we'll cover that once we get to that gun. And for the people that are interested, it has 26,000 health and 52 kilo of mass. And it does have a max fire rate count, which basically means to get the max fire rate, you need a specific amount of guns, which is 4. But like I always said, you never want to stick with 4 guns. Why? Because if one gun gets knocked off, you lose your fire rate. So you want to at least have 6 of them. My recommendation is always double it. So if the max fire rate is 4 guns, you need to place 8. That's what I always go for when I'm building stuff. It may work out, maybe not, but you don't want to go lower than minimum of 6 guns of the total fire rate. So let's hop into the next one. Next one on the list is tier 4 plasma. To place one tier 4 plasma, you need 30 CPU. And the robo ranking you get while placing one gun is 30,000. Which basically means you get placed into tier 3. Only with placing one gun. It's a bit higher of a robo ranking. You're 4,000 higher than the laser, but you know, for the people that are interested, it has 30,000 health and a mass of 60. The minimum count of the maximum fire rate count is 4 guns. Like I said, you always want to go a minimum of 6, because if one gun gets knocked off, you still have the maximum fire rate. But I would always recommend go minimum of 6 or 8 if you have the CPU. And the blast radius for a plasma, or this plasma, is 24 meters. Also will be on the screen, the entire screenshot. Next one is the tier 4 railgun, which is 30 CPU for placing one gun. It has a 30,000 robo ranking, which basically means you get placed into tier 3. It has the same rating and the same mass as the plasma. Only difference is you don't have a blast radius. So again, maximum fire rate of 4 guns. Also probably my second favorite railgun. My favorite is of course tier 3 ones. Then the tier 4, then the mega rail, which we'll come back to into the tier 5 video. Let's go to the next one on the list. Tier 4 nanos to help your ally in need. Place one medic gun or nano, because it's a medic gun. You need 26 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 26,000, which basically means you get placed into tier 3. You guessed it correctly. The minimum gun you need is 4. Always, like, if you want to go with a dedicated healer, you want to have a minimum of 6. But mainly, if you want to have it as a secondary, I would still recommend trying to get at least 4 as if it's your secondary. You don't go lower, because that just, yeah, you get the max fire rate. And like I said, it's a heal gun, so you could use it as primary or secondary, depending on what you want. If you want to be a support player, I would recommend this gun to be your main gun, and then have like minimum of 8. If it's going to be your secondary or third weapon, make sure you have a minimum of 4. If not, 2 with the tier 4 nanos is fine, but you heal your allies very slow. But don't go lower than 2. Next one on the list is the tier 4 Tesla, which by placing 1 Tesla, you need 24 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 24,000, which basically means you get placed into tier 3. Because everything you get placed in tier 3 so far. The max fire rate count, I don't know why they say that like that, but the max fire rate count is 2 Tesla. So that basically means to get the full potential out of your blades, you need a minimum of 2. But if you're smart, you don't only use 2, because they're very easy to knock off. So I would suggest a minimum of 8, like everything else on the list. Because that means even if 6 of them get shot off, you still have the maximum DPS you can do. Even for 1, you'd still do 50% of the damage you could. So make sure to use a minimum of 4. And of course, the screenshot will be up here. And the damage may differ for you than for me, because mine is only level 1. Whereas if you have level 10 Teslas, you do a bit more damage. Next one on the list is the tier 4 Arrow Flak. This gun is probably my newest favorite Arrow Flak cannon. It houses, or you need 150 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 150,000, which basically means you get placed into tier 4 without any movement parts or anything like that. There's a health of 165. Yeah, I don't know why I said it like that. It has a mass of 300, and the minimum you need to get the max fire rate is 2. In this case, I use it as most of the time when I use this, I use the secondary weapon. So basically, I used 1. But I would recommend, if you wanted to have a full-on with this thing, use 2 of them. Don't go higher than 2. It's not worth it. The blast radius is 21.25 meters. And yeah, like I said, it's probably worth investing in. Next one on the list is tier 4 Iron, which basically is a smaller version of the big Iron. It houses, or you need 145 CPU. Why I keep saying houses, I don't know. It gives you a robo ranking of 145,000, which basically means you get placed instantly into tier 4. It has a health of 159.5 thousand and a mass of 290. The minimum you need to get a max fire rate is 2. For this particular weapon, if you go use it, make sure to have a minimum of 3. Why 3? Because they're pretty big targets. They don't have the best health, especially because you're playing tier 4. They get easily knocked off. And because this is a close range weapon, you want a bit higher than the 2 you need. But if you're not using it as the main source, you could use 2 for if you need close range. But then I would combine it with, for example, a realm or a laser tag. But always keep the minimum of 2. You can't really go wrong with going higher as long as you don't go over the 4. But don't go with 1. It's not worth it. You're better off wasting your CPU on something else. Next one on the list, tier 4 Seeker. You need 140 CPU for this thing. It gives you a robo ranking of 140, which means you get placed into, you guessed it, tier 4. The health you get is 140,000 and the mass is 280. And you need a minimum of 2 guns to get the maximum fire rate. And the blast radius is 12.5 meters. Would I recommend this gun? Definitely not. You're either better off with the Proto Seeker or the Tier 3 Seeker or the large missiles, which are Tier 5. I personally do not like this thing, but if you want to go for a static one or you want to go for a flyer copter with this thing, I would recommend getting at least 4. Why? Because they're big targets, easy to knock off, especially if you're against a decent rail player or a bad rail player. It's a very massive target. Use a minimum of 4, and then you probably don't have any spare CPU to do anything else with it. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it. Because 2 is just not worth your while. And the next one, the last one on the list for the weapons is Tier 4 Chain Gun. Chain Gun, you need 165 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 165,000, which, you guessed it, places you in Tier 4. It has a health of 181.5 thousand, a mass of 330 kilos, and you need a minimum of 2 guns to get the maximum fire rate. Mixed feelings about this gun. Yes, it's a pretty good gun. Only if you use it, you want to use it as a primary weapon, which basically then means you need a minimum of 4, because it's otherwise they're massive targets like the last couple on the list. It's not like an arrow flag that it's going to be a secondary weapon. It's either going to be your primary weapon or you're better off not using it. And if you want it to be your primary weapon, 2 of them is just way too low of a number. Because it's a large target, easy to knock off. It does have a decent amount of health, so it could tank like a couple shots, but that's about it. And because it's your primary weapon, you don't want to lose your fire rate on it very easily. So I would kind of recommend it, but kind of not, depending on what you want. Next one on the list is movement parts. And the first movement part we'll cover is mech legs. Placing 1 mech leg sets you back 98 CPU. It's nearly 100. And the robo ranking you get for it is 98, which puts you exactly in Tier 4. A bit lower and you'll be Tier 3, but 1 mech leg places you in Tier 4. The health on these things are basically, I'm not going to even try it out. And the speed is 170 miles per hour. All the stats will be up in the screen, so you can read it for yourself. I'll always recommend a minimum of 2 mech legs, because they're pretty damn tanky. I would recommend, however, if you make a mech, make a combination with hovers, because if the mech legs get destroyed, you still have a secondary movement type. Next one on the list is Tier 4 Sprinter legs, which sets you back the exact same amount as mech legs, and that's 98 CPU. Robo ranking is 98,000, which basically puts you in Tier 4. The maximum speed you get with this is 200 miles per hour. The minimum you want to go with this is a 2, but I would recommend go 3, because I personally like to use 3 of them, but you can use 2 as well. But then again, if you use 2, you might want to have a secondary movement part, and with 3 as well, because when it comes to legs, you always want to have a secondary movement part, because they're easy to knock off. Next one on the list is Tier 4 Insect legs, which basically sets you back 44 CPU for 1. Placing 1 will also give you a robo ranking of 44,000, which basically means you're around halfway into Tier 3. Basically, you could use one of the legs and get in Tier 3. The maximum speed, however, is 202 miles per hour. The minimum legs you want to go with this are basically, in my opinion, around 6. Because, yeah, these things are not tanky at all. Very easy to shoot out. And, yeah, you always want to have a secondary movement part when it comes to legs. So make sure you use a secondary movement part. In this case, I would recommend building something with, for example, wings. Next one on the list is the tier 4 hover. Pretty much my favorite movement type out of all of the above we've covered so far. Pretty much my favorite movement type nonetheless. It sets you back 28 CPU per hover. It has a 28,000 robo ranking, which basically means you get placed into tier 3 with only one. It has a top speed of 200 miles per hour and a carry capacity of 2.2 thousand kilograms, which is pretty easy or pretty nice. When you think about it, a tier 4 tank track is around 3,000. So you basically need 2 of those hovers to carry 1 tank track, which is kind of nice. Tier 4 tank track is basically 60 CPU for 1. It has a robo ranking of 60,000 and it sets you back to tier 3. It has a top speed of 180 and it's pretty tanky, as you could expect. Would I recommend this? Not really. It would be nice to have it built into a sprinter, but you want to go for a lower tank than tank track. So would I recommend this one? No, not really. Next one on the list is tier 4 wheels, which are pretty much, for me, the next shitty type. I do not like wheels. That's a personal opinion, but looking at them, they're pretty okay. They're 50 CPU each. For 1, you get 50 CPU. It gives you a robo ranking of 50,000, which basically means you get placed into tier 3 instantly. It has top speed of 230, which you can also increase, like you hovers with thrusters and rudders, or propellers, but that's a different story. And they're not very tanky. They're very easy to knock off. That's why I do not very much like them. For the size and CPU cost, they're not really worth it. You're better off going with tank tracks or Maclex in this case. So wheels and tank tracks are pretty useless in my opinion. Next one on the list is a tier 4 rotor, which basically sets you back 60 CPU for 1, and it gives you a robo ranking of 60,000, which basically means tier 3. It has a carry mass of 11.2 thousand kilograms, which is pretty nice, and a top speed of 180 miles per hour. But that's with only the rudders, not with thrusters equipped. It has low health. It's 300 kilograms. Like I said, everything will be up in the screen. I personally don't like them. I like using them, for example, for a copter flyer or a copter plane, which basically means you have wings and rotors. But the tier 4 is so big, I rarely use it. I only use it if I want to make an art bot, and that's pretty much. I can't think of any scenario why you want this big of a rotor. Apart from having, for example, a copter-ish build, looking like a real copter. So would I recommend this one? Not really, except if you intend to use it for art purposes. Tier 4 wings and rudders. Start off wings. One tier 4 wing will set you back 26 CPU and 26,000 robo ranking, which basically means tier 3. It has a carry mass of 5,000, a max speed of 240 with only the wings. It's pretty weak with only 27.3 thousand health, but it's pretty light. And the rudder itself sets you back 23 CPU, 23,000 robo ranking, a carry mass of 1.5 thousand, and a top speed of 240. With these things, I would say they're pretty good. I like to use them. So I would kind of recommend it, but I won't recommend it. It's good if you know how to build with wings. If you don't know how to build tri-forcing, rod forcing, etc., wings are a very big object and very easy to knock off. So if you don't know how to transfer the damage in a specific way, or damage sink, etc., it's very easy for your thing to get destroyed. And wings, you pretty much want to have a secondary movement and not really as primary movement, because, like I said, air flak cannons are pretty nice. And your biggest enemy if you're flying. Next one on the list is the tier 4 thruster, which basically sets you back 16 CPU. It has a robo ranking of 16,000, which basically means, yet again, it places you in tier 3. It has a max speed of 240 miles per hour, and yeah, that's basically it. You can't really use it as primary movement because you need, for example, wings, rudders, wheels, sprinter legs, call it whatever. Pretty much it's the secondary movement part for whatever your main movement part is. Would I recommend this thing? Yes, I would recommend it. I would recommend from tier 2 to tier 5 thrusters because they're very useful for depending on what type of build you are building. So yes, I would recommend it. Last one on the movement part list is tier 4 Propeller. The tier 4 Propeller sets you back 100 CPU and 100,000 robo ranking, which basically means you're getting into tier 4 with only placing this thing. It has a health of 125,000 and a mass of 500 and a top speed of 138.6 miles per hour. Which basically means you don't want to use this as primary movement part, you want to use it as secondary movement part. These things are most common on tier 5 bots and not really on tier 4 bots because of the robo ranking. So would I recommend this thing? Yes, but not until you're ready to get into tier 5. Because this thing is good once you get into tier 5. If you want to use a rudder or propeller, I mean, for your sprinter, you're better off using tier 3 in tier 4 than the tier 4 one in tier 4, because by the time you build everything out of tier 4 material, you're in tier 5. So get this one later. I would recommend it, but in tier 5. Now for the last step, shields. We start off with Electro Shield A from tier 4, which basically sets you back 44 CPU for 1. It has a robo ranking of 44,000, which basically means you get placed into tier 3. It has health of 92.4 thousand and a mass of 44 kilograms. Personally, I do not like shields only for aesthetic purposes, but if you want to use them, they're okay. But I wouldn't recommend shields purely because they're shields. I don't see the point of using them. Let me know in the comments. Are shields worth it? Yes or no? Tier 4 Shields B. Set you back 48 CPU, 48,000 robo ranking, which basically means tier 3. It has 100,000 health. You can see the screenshot up there. And 48 kilograms. Again, I wouldn't recommend shields, but it's up to you if you use them or not. You could make some cool designs with them. And the last one on my list is tier 4 Electro Shield C, which basically sets you back 52 CPU and 52,000 robo ranking, which basically means halfway tier 3. It has a health of 109.2 thousand and a mass of 252 kilograms. And yeah, it says the shield is able to withstand a lot of damage. Well, that's a lot of damage, but I personally don't like shields. Tell me in the comments, should I make a recent video why I don't like shields? Let me know. Would I recommend this shield? Not really. It's too big and it's too awkward to work with.